DVB, Digital Fast.
Welcome to the DVB Newsroom. In our program today, we invited Aung Clements, the artist, author, and investigative journalist who wrote several books, including The Voice of Hope, Burma Voices of Freedom, and Conversation with the Dictator is the latest book. Hello, Aung. Welcome to the DVB Newsroom. Thanks for sharing your time with us. As an introduction, I would like you to tell our audience about your story, how you fall in love with Burma since 1980s up until now.
Well, Mon Mon Myat, I'm honored to be in company with you, the courageous people of the DVB TV, the revolutionaries, the political prisoners, the 54 million people at this very moment in your country of Myanmar, my spiritual home, my Dhamma home, my revolutionary home, who are undergoing one of the most epic archetypal confrontations that we've seen in modern times, with a sociopathic dictatorship supported by Xi Jinping in China, Vladimir Putin in Russia, banks, oil conglomerates, weapons manufacturers. And within this, my personal relationship to Myanmar has been the most influential experience categorically in my entire life. First, having gone there in 1977, where I had the aspiration to ordain as a Buddhist monk under the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. I had read his book on Vipassana insight meditation, was deeply moved by that. He reminded me when I met him in the north at his home village that you can only stay 7 days. We live under dictatorship. So to make a long story really short, to the point, although I could go on for weeks and months, is I invited the Venerable Sayadaw to come to America to lead Satipatthana Vipassana retreats. At the end of those two-week retreats, I again asked the Venerable Sayadaw in 1979 if I could ordain with him and go back to Burma and try our very best to allow me to live in the monastery to practice my deepest heart aspiration, which was Satipatthana or insight meditation under his guidance. I was granted a visa under Ne Win. I stayed for a very short time, something like 3.5 or 4 years, was told to leave the country by Ne Win, no reason given. Of course, everyone who paid attention to Myanmar, to Asia, to democracy and revolution understood the 88 revolution. And that just completely elevated me to a new level of inspiration and tragedy simultaneously. On the one hand, to see the students leading a nation with their heart, their moral courage, their tenacity to confront autocratic, dictatorial, violent, corrupt dictatorship, and to do it with peace, with heart, with metta, loving kindness, karuna, compassion. It was met with abject violence, as we all know, tragically. Diplomats on the scene, anywhere between 3,000 and 10,000 boys and girls and elders, monks and nuns, priests, farmers, shopkeepers were mercilessly murdered at close range by the deranged dictator Ne Win. Jump time, I went into the country underground. And from that point, I met with the NCGUB out in Manipur. I became very close friends with the leadership that escaped under that regime. And I just could not respond to what felt like the desecration of my family. And I think those who have been nuns or monks or practitioners of intensive meditation can understand the depth of feeling that one has with their elders, their contemporaries, when they're being violently oppressed. From that point of time, I wrote a book called Burma, the Next Killing Fields that was graced with a brilliant foreword by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, And a number of magazines interviewed me, Time and Newsweek and various other ones, to share my direct experience. Again, I was an American in areas of struggle, but never a combatant there. But it broke my heart, Mon Mon Myat. 1995, Aung San Suu Kyi is released in July after 6 years of detention. I was approached by a reputable European publisher. Can you get into the country? Would you interview her? Can you bring her story of the revolution of the spirit to the world in conversation with her? And that is when I went back into the country, and through the grace of the Dhamma, the Bodhisattvas, my good paramis, the paramis of the people in the country, Dasu, other leaders, I was introduced to Dasu by the late Saya U Tin U, the former general under Ne Win, who was the co-founder, as we all know, who studied Burma's politics with Dasu for the NLD, the National League for Democracy, a synonym for radical revolutionary nonviolent struggle for freedom, equality, justice, and peace. And we spent 6 months in and out of her home, her compound at 54 University Avenue, where I became very close friends with her husband, her kids, and her colleagues. And I was graced with learning up close through that association, her philosophical, her Dhamma or spiritual, her human, her educational intelligence about what democracy meant, what revolution meant, what was the ethos and the ecological, call it the relational intelligence of your expression of nonviolent resistance. Okay, that was in 96. I was told to leave the country quickly, and I was subsequently banned for 17 years based upon a book that Dasu titled The Voice of Hope, Conversations with Aung San Suu Kyi, Burma's Nobel Peace Laureate. And many books since then and films. And the core of my relationship with this is not only Myanmar. It's not about Dasu, U Tin U, U Chi Mung, U Win Tin, U Win Tain, or the people alone. There is a fundamental psychological, existential, spiritual, emotional intelligence that in my humble association with those deep rivers of transformational wisdom, I've never seen it on the planet. As an American with Martin Luther King, bless him, with Nelson Mandela and his incredible power of reconciliation and Desmond Tutu, Gandhian principles. All I can say is that Dasu and the leadership of the NLD, which represented, from her humble opinion, I am nobody. I am only a representative of the people. My last point, very few people know, maybe you very well know Mon Mon Myat and the other people of the DBB and the people of Burma. You know, having been a former Buddhist monk in your country, we had deep respect for a venerable Sayadaw way back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the venerable Sayadaw U Ottama, deeply inspired by Gandhi when Gandhi was in Burma visiting, who, as we all know, those who study Burma and Myanmar politics, and Myanmar's resistance to not dictatorship, but British colonial settler genocidal oppression / collective slavery, U Ottama, from Rakhine State of all places, spoke of the power of the human heart, moral courage, ethical moral wisdom to confront nonviolently oppressive policies without vilifying the so-called enemy. He took Gandhian principles to a heightened post-British Buddhist expression of revolution. And that is the seed that awakened in me a respect for Daw Suu and her colleagues. They carried on that tradition, and they carry it on today behind bars.
Thank you, Alan. And you talk about the tradition of authoritarianism in Myanmar since the time of monarchy, colonialism, and militarism for many decades. And you have learned how hard Daw Suu has tried to transcend this authoritarianism in our country. So can you tell us more detail about Daw Suu's political ideology in that attempt, and why her endeavor, stay far to reach her ultimate goal to transcend authoritarianism in Myanmar? And what is your opinion about that?
Having been blessed to be near and in conversation on a repeated basis, on a regular basis, over decades, not just in 95 and 96. But after I was unbanned by President Thein Sein back in 2011, I met with Daw Suu when she was invited to come to San Francisco to be awarded the Václav Havel Award for Creative Dissent. First time we'd seen each other in 17 years. And she and I talked, and she invited me to come back to support her country's revolution of the spirit. Talk to the leaders, talk to the former political prisoners, bring their message of revolutionary moral courage, reconciliation, peaceful coexistence, the power of the divine feminine with the human voice as vehicle rather than the fist, the gun, the missile, the drone. Daw Suu's ideology, Mon Mon Myat, it's a message for the world. It's not solely her message. Her teacher, the late Venerable Sayadaw U Pandita, my own Dhamma teacher after Mahasi Sayadaw passed away. I was blessed to be privileged to be in dialogues with the three of them, along with U Tinu, to listen to how Daw Suu was mentored, eagerly present with the Venerable Sayadaw in the power of metta, karuna, loving kindness, compassion filled right speech for the purpose of collective harmony, reconciliation, and nonviolent, peaceful coexistence. You as a woman, and I know you from our interviews, it's a rarefied concept to meet anyone in the world who does not want to seek your harm. Daw Suu's ideology was one of using the power of the human voice, of caring. Sayadaw U Pandita encouraged her not to vilify dictatorship, not to demonize them. Speak to, as best as you're capable, to their latent, I use here carefully a Pali Buddhist words, hiri and otapa, conscious shame and conscious regret for transgressions. The seeds that, when moistened, make one contract from wrongdoing, unskillful speech, thought, and actions. She said, if you're going to lead a country in a nonviolent struggle for freedom, you must learn the power of Dhamma-infused speech. How many times did I know and hear and listen to the late Venerable Seda U Pandita talking to her methodically, Mon Mon Myat, on the intelligence and the careful architecture of choosing your words wisely, Dasu. Choose the timing of them. As a musician and a singer would choose the tonality of them. Understand the frequency imbued with their intentionality. The space between words, and seeking the upliftment of the so-called adversary without attachment to an outcome. And that was the architecture of Burma's struggle for freedom that very few people understand, not about Dasu alone. Uwintin, Utinu, Uchimung, Uwintain, how many other men and women around the country understood that the revolution of the spirit was first and foremost to mindfully and intelligently challenge your own collective kilesas, greed, anger, and delusion, lobha, dosa, moha. And from that dedication, inspire transformational in society. Otherwise, and I close here, Dasu made it very clear that if we use the gun, as my father did, General Aung San, that have been used throughout history, and when people disagree with your views, which is human nature, they'll see that you took power by the gun, they'll take the gun and try to take power from you. It may be the slow road, Alan, but I'm a believer in the prosperity of a culture of peace through dialogue, not the use of weapons. But she was very quick to point out it's not an absolute right or wrong. So I stopped there.
Thank you, Alan. Do you think Dasu still has a role in Burma's struggle for freedom? Anyway,
More
can she
more
be
than ever.
useful? Yeah, so just let me finish my question. Do you think any role can she can be useful, in the recent political deadlock? Because it's Burma again and now trapped in a political deadlock again, and then we are in the vicious cycle of violence again. So is there any role of Dasu in this situation?
That's a very powerful, provocative question. And I just want to answer it spontaneously without any preparation. I feel no criticism anywhere. I'm an outsider. I so respect the people of your country. No place is safe in that country. Dasu, President Win Myint, the lawfully elected democratic leaders that are unlawfully imprisoned at this very moment, based upon the dictator, Min Aung Hlaing, and his henchmen and women, decapitated democracy in Burma in February 2021, known globally as Min Aung Hlaing's deranged military coup d'etat because of his bogus accusations of voter irregularity and fraud in the November 2020 election, which has completely been obliterated by the Carter governance administration who oversaw the elections. And we all know that that is an absolute fiction, a manufactured, well, a lie. My point to answer your question, Dasu, President Win Myint, and those elected democratic leaders that are right now, at this very moment, in Obo prison in Mandalay, in insane prison in Rangoon and throughout the gulags within Myanmar, the size of France or Germany or Texas. 22,000, according to those who study the details of the life of the political prisoner, the styles of torture, those who die behind bars unknown through disease and execution. 22,000 courageous, radical prisoners of conscience, dissenters, unwilling to participate in manufactured information, AKA lies, by Ming Online. They play such a crucial role right now, Mon Mon Myat. They are the reason, they are the catalyst for leaders and influencers worldwide, from President Donald Trump to Tulsi Gabbard, to Robert Kennedy Jr., to the prime ministers of the EU and the presidents around the world, to the leaders of ASEAN. They are Burma's moral currency. They play more a part today than ever because they are the elected democratic leaders. The last point here, imagine leaders of the Western world. Every elected democratic leader in an election, with the vast majority, something like 86% of the people of Myanmar voted for the people who are now imprisoned because of one man and his henchwomen and men decided he did not like the results because of his fear of losing power and privilege and all the various things that come with that psychosis of the denial of the people. That is the reason, Mon Mon Myat, that will elevate and excite actions around the world if we, among the people of the world, the activists, the influencers, Sean Turnell, Ma Thida, Kim Harris, Aung San Suu Kyi's son, our campaign, Fergus Harlow with the useyourliberty.org campaign, the GoFundMe campaign under the book's title, Conversation with a Dictator. If enough people get behind why they matter, imagine every democratic leader in France and Germany and Spain that was elected was imprisoned, decapitated, intolerable that every member of Congress and the Senate in America, along with the president and cabinet, was imprisoned. Unthinkable outrage on the global scale. In Myanmar, that is what is happening. Does she have a role to play? She's playing it. President Win Myint's playing it. Sea U Win Tin, his 23rd year imprisonment, is playing it. 22,000 courageous women, men, elders, priests, monks, nuns, teachers, civil servants, doctors, nurses at this moment in your prisons in Myanmar are playing a vital role. Hear our conscience. Support democracy. We are brothers and sisters in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the foundational principles of the United Nations. Call on Ming Online, Mr. President Trump, right now, as you did with Thailand and Cambodia. And they stopped their war. You called on India and Pakistan, stop your killing. President Donald Trump, I call upon you, Venerable Sir, call on Ming Online. You release these prisoners now, or you will pay for the consequences of defying freedom and democracy in the beloved country of Myanmar. If Mr. Trump did that, or any president and prime minister in the world who had the moral courage, Ming Online would be in Moscow with Assad under Putin's umbrella tomorrow. And I call upon you, Xi Jinping, and you, Mr. Putin, it's far better in your interest to have a democracy in Myanmar rather than a sociopathic dictatorship. Does Aung San Suu Kyi matter? More than ever.
Thank you so much for your strong message and calling for freedom of Aung San Suu Kyi and all the political prisoners and prisoners of conscience. So you had many conversations with all of them, and this is coming from your impression from your conversation with all these people in previous decades. So have you ever tried to speak to any dictator from Myanmar, before 2021? And I saw in your book, you had a conversation, fictional conversation with the dictator. How did you get that idea for that book, Conversation with the Dictator? Who is your target audience, and what do you want to achieve from writing this book?
It's interesting to hear this question. It took me a year of pretty much isolation, Mon Mon Myat, to create this, what's been called a literary feature film on conscience and moral revolution. Back when I was a monk at the Mahasi Thatanayekta in, at that time, Rangoon, founded by the former Prime Minister U Nu and lots of other lay men and women, I was told to leave by Ne Win and his people several times as a monk. And at that time, I guess maybe a brash American artist, somewhat deranged through excessive meditation syndrome, I asked if I could meet with Ne Win to appeal the exiting orders, and people were just shocked by the concept of you don't talk to the dictator. So that was number one. That was my first outing. I just grew up with conversation, and direct communication was by far better than avoidance, fear, shame, or violence. Just grew up in a culture.
That was what Dosu tried since the beginning. She tried to talk to Ne Win as well, right? So that's right. Dialogues that she started trying to talk to the dictator. So that's what she tried. Yeah.
And Mon Myat, she was highly encouraged at those earliest talks. You may remember in 95 and 96, after her first release, after 6 years of detention, when she and U Tinu and U Chi Mong stood above her gate at 54 University Avenue and spoke to the people who risked their freedom, their home, their bank account, their jobs, their lives. She was speaking to the dictator Ne Win. All of them were doing all that they possibly could to speak to the authoritarian architecture inherent within the Ne Win ecostructure of violent totalitarian oppression. That's where they were trained on how to moisten the Hiri and Otapa, to relax the deep, invenerating grip of the human psyche and the DNA mixed with their own karma, to overcome this projection of their psychopathology upon the people. Your anger, your greed, and your delusion is not caused by them. It's your inability to see the nature of moha, the Pali Buddhist word. But coming back to your question, also after my unbanning from Burma, I went back into the country based on Dosu's support. And I also sent a letter to, at that time, dictator Than Shwe. I actually felt, quite honestly, as an investigative journalist, I really wanted to understand, why do you kill, oppress, torture, rape, mercilessly denigrate your own beloved people who you as a Buddhist and they as a Buddhist in a multicultural, multi-ethnic country, why do you do that? I genuinely wanted to know. And the reason for a lot of this was based upon the my teacher, the Venerable Sayadaw U Pandita. He made it very clear to me, Mon Mon Myat, in the earliest days of my involvement with Dasu and U Tinu and the rest of them, U Win Tin, and that your role is not to vilify, to demonize, and to aggravate. It's to elevate, to expand, moisten the latent wisdom, metta, karuna, hiri, conscious transformational awakening in the mind of the other. And I'm a fundamental Theravada Buddhist, and Sayadaw U Pandita was. And I'm just a real believer that all of us have those latent tendencies to transgress if the conditions tragically move this way or that way. That's the beauty of the Dhamma, is ehipasiko, wupanai, for yourself, see what's true, self-responsibility. And so Dasu, people don't really know Dasu. I've begun to see how many opinions people have about her being autocratic, authoritarian, elitist. She just happens to be super intelligent, short-tempered like me and a lot of other men and women in the world, but she will look after your well-being even if you're the enemy. Very rare in the world do you have an individual who will take care of you as family who's transgressed upon your own family. She's a radical expression of reconciliation and forgiveness in action. My last point about this, Mon Mon Myat, and I think it's important for the people of the world to hear, I was blessed to spend 9 nights with my teacher, the late Venerable Sayadaw U Pandita, before he passed away in 2016. We did a book of conversations called Wisdom for the World, The Requisites of Reconciliation, a book of conversations. And he outlined the requisites of reconciliation on how to go about bringing peaceful coexistence, even with radical disagreement, how to go about that in the country of Myanmar for Dasu, for U Win Tin, for U Tinu, for U Win Tain, for the NLD, for the people, how to use the power of the human heart to overcome this war machine, this abject, deep state-driven addiction to violence, toxic patriarchy, and the more that you can kill to so-called extinguish the so-called other, the more successful and celebrated you are. Look at going on today in Israel and in Palestine, in Ukraine, in Russia, Sudan. Dasu and the leaders of the Burma, they took the high road of the human heart and said, let's put the gun down, let's put the missile down, let's put the drone down and talk about it. It was an experiment. You can't say it failed because they were led by conscience and dignity. And I really respect that.
Thanks, Ellen. And this is my last question, In history, there was a time when King Atoka or Asok felt ashamed of himself for wrongdoing and killing of people. At any chance that military chief Min Aung Hlaing will get that sense, do you think he will be the last dictator of Burma? How do you think?
I created this book, Conversation with the Dictator, a challenge to the authoritarian assault, with the subtitle, A Fictional Dialogue with Burma's Dictator Min Aung Hlaing. It was designed to do my very best way over here from a distance, 10,000 miles away, with an opportunity to sit in the Naypyidaw Palace with this man, heart to heart, mind to mind, conscience to conscience, truth to truth. I invited him in my last book, that I co-authored with my colleague and co-author Fergus Harlow, The Voice of Hope, Aung San Suu Kyi from Prison. I wrote a letter to the dictator. That's the subtitle. Inviting him for a dialogue. He never answered, of course. So 300 images are created with this 5-act dialogue with Ming Online. And the book is designed for you, sir. We're going to do a digital filmed version in Burmese that will easily cross borders. And I pray, sir, that you watch that film, or if you get a copy, read the book. It was written for you to do the right thing by your people, by your conscience, by your wife, by your colleagues, by the nuns and the monks. You got a sham election coming up. The monks and the nuns of Myanmar could do exactly what the late Venerable Sayadaw U Ottama did to Gandhian in his revolutionary Dhamma style, confront the British settler genocidal colonialist architecture. And look what they did. He was part of a lineage that eventually became Aung San and the first Prime Minister U Nu, and then eventually Aung San's daughter, and all the people of your country are fighting off the shackles of colonial domination and dictatorial consciousness. We've got an example in the world. This book is a live aid, like in 1985, that Bob Geldof created, and the BBC showed the world the images of Ethiopian starvation and famine. This book is an illustration of behind the scenes of the beauty and the horror of the people of Myanmar. Ming Online is a Buddhist. I close here. And you must be aware, as anyone would talk to you, including your wife and your children, your family, the monks and the nuns who have the moral courage, your behavior inevitably will result in rebirth as a peta, an animal, a centipede, a rat. You know that. And your fear keeps you entrenched in doing the very thing that is your demise. And you've come to the end of the road, sir. It's obvious. The revolutionaries, the ethnic armed organizations, the people of the country voted in 2020 for the leadership that is imprisoned today. I say to you with heart, save your soul, your family. Get on national television and immediately release the political prisoners now. Get on a private plane, take your money, go wherever you can feel safe in Yunnan province or in Beijing with Xi Jinping or Moscow. And you can be sure that your military hierarchy will be graced by your exit. And the people of your country will celebrate a peace, and you could possibly redeem yourself on the global stage by having done the right thing. I don't seek your harm, you seek your harm, sir. And the whole world knows that. And guess what? This book was written for you. It was written for President Donald Trump, the president of my beloved America. It was written for the ASEAN leaders. And they're all going to get copies along with these images of these interviews with a letter from Fergus Harlow and myself calling upon them to do exactly what I'm saying to you right now, sir. And just as Mr. Trump spoke out for Thailand and Cambodia, India and Pakistan, your days are numbered. He is coming after you, and he will do it as soon as he hears the truth, because he's a man of conscience and peace And he understands Daw Soo's legacy. He too has been an attempted assassination, just as Daw Soo has been on numerous occasions, and her lawyer at the Rangoon airport on your behest. Your days are numbered. Do the right thing, sir, because these books are going to be mailed out any day now, and Mr. Trump or other leaders around the world are going to start to speak out, and they're coming after you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Thanks for your contribution, and thanks for your passion toward Burma and people of Burma. Thanks for
It's
sharing
my
your
honor.
time with us.
Thank you.